This video is going to be a brief explanation of what the Quiet Revolution was and how it is related to the Cold War and the United States, or in turn, how the United States may have affected the Quiet Revolution. So, the Quiet Revolution itself, this took place in Quebec, which is a province up in Canada, right in the United States backyard. So, to give you some background, in the 1940s, there was lots of problems with the social and economic aspects of Quebec. The education system was failing. They made the education requirements so rigorous that the dropout rate was extremely high. You had kids that were dropping out of school at the age of 14 and 15, and the rates were continuing to increase. And at the time, the industry, their main form of industry in terms of the economy was agriculture. A lot of people were farmers. So these children who are farmers, they already know how to make money for themselves. They already know how to farm their land. So they felt as if they didn't really need to go through that rigorous education just to learn how to work the land. So that being said, there was a huge problem with how their economy was set up. And in terms of the jobs as well, those were also becoming more and more outdated as the years progressed on. So, starting on the 1940s, moving up toward the 1960s, um, Quebec started to urbanize a lot more. People started migrating more to the cities. And as a result, their economy needed to change with that population migration. Obviously, if the majority of people are going to be living in a city, farming is going to take a huge hit. So they needed to transition their economy into a more industrial form instead of agriculture. So during this time between leading up into the 1960s, there was a huge push for social and economic change. The authority originally had been coming right from the church and not the state. So as we progressed from the 1940s to the 1960s, the church started giving up more and more of their power, and that power in turn went over to the state and the government. So, like I said before, the population began to urbanize, and the population itself actually grew by 2 million people from 1940 to 1960. So, something needed to change. And this is where the Cold War kind of comes into play, because during this time of social change and economic change, there's the rise of certain communist and socialist parties that are extreme left wing parties. And again, the United States is going to be strongly opposing this because they do not want communism right along their borders. So there was this political group called the FLQ, and what they did was they used more violent tactics to try and make their influence known in Quebec. And they actually took a lot of their strategies from different guerrilla units around the world, and they liked that aspect of militia violence, and they actually used bombs on their people, and they incorporated a series of bombings. Four people died as a result of their actions, and all in all, it was a very crazy point in time. And you can see as a result of this, like, why is the FLQ terrorizing and using violence as their main strategy? Well, a lot of the support came from people who opposed American involvement in the war in Vietnam. So you may think to yourself, well, how has the FLQ gained that much support in a province? Well, America's bordering Canada, and they see that America is using very shady tactics to combat communism all over the world, and especially in South Vietnam, and putting troops in a different country to try and combat communism. So that's where there's the main support from the FLQ came from. And honestly, in short, the main groups of Canada came together, the main political groups came together, and everyone in Quebec politics agreed that yes, change was necessary, but they strongly disagreed on the extent of change and the means to achieve it. Meaning they did not want to use the kind of violence that the FLQ was using to gain uh, political to gain popularity in a political sense. All right, so that's the relation that it has in the Cold War, and really how wanted to emphasize how close it is to the United States and how the United States had an influence on the gaining popularity of that